Hello and welcome to Access Asia. I'm Yuka Royer. Coming up, a setback for India's LGBTQ community as the Supreme Court refuses to legalise same-sex unions. Advocates vow to continue their fight for marriage equality. China's President Xi Jinping holds a massive gathering to celebrate 10 years of his signature Belt and Road initiative. So where does the new Silk Road vision stand today? One of Southeast Asia's most colourful festivals returns to Myanmar, but celebrations are tinged with sadness as violence escalates in other parts of the country. India's Supreme Court has refused to legalise same-sex marriage, saying that the right to marry is not a fundamental right. This comes 5 years after the same court decriminalised gay sex. In response to more than 20 petitions filed since last year, the court backed the government's view that changing the institution of marriage was a job for Parliament rather than the court, while recommending that a panel of experts be set up to consider giving them greater access to social services. Rohin Bhatt is a lawyer and queer rights activist who represented some of the petitioners in this case. Rohin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you attended all of the Supreme Court hearings that took place back in the spring. What do you have to say about the ruling, and did it come as a surprise?
I think it did. I think if you follow the hearings all throughout, I think, there was a lot of pushback. But at the end of the day, we as lawyers, as Indians, and as more importantly, as queer rights activists, had full faith in the court. But we feel horribly, horribly let down by the Supreme Court.
Horribly let down. Why is that?
Because when we went to court, we thought we weren't asking for anything new. The right to marry as a fundamental right has been in the past upheld by the Supreme Court. But this has now been overturned and turned the right to marry a person of your choice into a statutory right. So the Parliament can tomorrow pass a law and take that right away. And that's something we've seen with this verdict, where the court says it's for the Parliament to decide and not for the court.
Now, could you explain to us the argument of the court behind its decision? It had something to do with India's Special Marriage Act. What exactly were the judges asked to consider?
Right. So under the Indian Special Marriage Act, any two people can marry provided certain conditions are fulfilled. The word used in the Section 4 of the Special Marriage Act is any two persons. As lawyers, we argued that any two persons should mean that it is independent of person's gender and sexual orientation. As a result, we asked the court to read into the Special Marriage Act the validity of queer unions. The court has, however, rejected this argument and said that it is for the Parliament to decide and not for the court.
So what's next now then for India's LGBTQ community? Are you going to now put pressure on Parliament to act?
Well, yes, but we're not giving up so easily on our courts either. We will ask the court to reconsider its decision, and we'll see where it takes us. At the same time, I think the advocacy efforts outside the court also need to be strengthened, and all of us are working on doing that and making sure that our presence is felt.
And do you think there is a possibility in the court reconsidering its decision?
I think it's hard to make those predictions right now, but make no mistake, we will not rest until the court has chosen to reconsider its decision.
Now,
it can be now, it can be 10 years later, but the court will have to reconsider and stand up for its queer citizens.
Now, Indian society, meanwhile, has evolved, and there are millions of gay people now. Could LGBTQ rights become an issue at next year's parliamentary elections?
I don't think so, because we presented evidence to the court that the issue of marriage equality had come up multiple times in the past 4 years before the Parliament, and the Parliament in its unsympathetic way has chosen to not act on these issues. So I think the court has relegated us to a Parliament that is insensitive and has chosen to pass the buck to a Parliament that is unwilling to act. So I don't think it could be an election issue next year.
Rohin Bhatt, LGBTQ rights activist and lawyer, thank you once again. It was billed as the most important diplomatic event in China this year. Dozens of world leaders descended on Beijing for the two-day Belt and Road Forum. Launched in 2013, President Xi Jinping's signature infrastructure strategy aimed to boost trade through land and maritime routes and to provide an alternative vision for global development. A decade and $1 trillion later, it has cemented China's position as an economic superpower, but also spurred criticism. James Versina has this report.
Side by side with his guest of honour, Xi Jinping welcomed Vladimir Putin, together with other heads of state, to China's third Belt and Road Forum.
The Belt and Road cooperation was proposed by China, but its benefits and its opportunities are for the world to share. Let us advance modernization in all countries. Let's build an open, inclusive and interconnected world for common development and build together a community that'll lead to a shared future for mankind.
Since launching the project with 8 partner countries 10 years ago, the venture's attracted 152 member states. And today, in an effort to keep the ball rolling, Beijing is committing a further $100 billion worth of funding to the Belt and Road Initiative. Over the past decades, China has been criticised for the damage that its mega-projects such as dams, power plants, roads, rail links or ports have inflicted on ecosystems and livelihoods across the world. In response, it said that it would focus on greener development, favouring smaller-scale projects instead, and turning towards the tech industry. But its business methods have also come under scrutiny.
China does not pay attention to good governance practices, neither do they care about good governance practices like corruption when they are providing infrastructure facilities and interventions in Africa. That's the most worrying thing, in the sense that many countries have seen roads or infrastructure or even energy port facilities whose cost of construction leaves a lot to be desired.
While investment in certain countries has come round to haunt them.
They're carrying an awful lot of debt in developing countries, which are going to struggle to ever really pay it back. And that is the kind of biggest takeaway, I think, from China's perspective. And we've actually seen over the past, really before the pandemic, I would argue from 2016-17 onwards, we saw a real slowdown.
While Beijing says it's signed over $2 trillion worth of contracts globally, it's been accused of pushing some states further into debt and has spent $240 billion in bailing them out after they were unable to repay loans for projects in their own countries.
Myanmar's military government has recently hosted a ceremony to mark 8 years of a nationwide ceasefire agreement. But 3 of the rebel groups that signed the deal boycotted the event amid ever-worsening violence. Since seizing power in a coup in 2021, the junta has waged a brutal crackdown on dissent. Earlier this month, an air raid on a village hosting hundreds of displaced civilians in Kachin State left dozens killed or injured. Human Rights Watch says the deadly attack constitutes a war crime. Meanwhile, thousands of Buddhists joined the Phondao Pagoda Festival, which returned to Myanmar's Shan State after a 3-year hiatus. But the long-awaited event was tinged with sadness as war rages on elsewhere. Catherine Keddy-Clifford has the story.
As the sun rises over Lake Inle, dozens of boats glide across the surface, rowed in unison. The ceremony, a first in 3 years, following the COVID pandemic and the military's 2021 coup. For many, joy is laced with sadness as violence continues elsewhere in Myanmar.
We are enjoying ourselves here, but on the other side, the situation is not good. We feel sad about it. At the same time, we're happy to resume the festival after 3 years.
During a 17-day festival, 4 sacred Buddha statues are brought from their main pagoda, rowed on a barge clockwise around the villages along the lake's shores. Fishermen from the local Intha ethnic minority practice a unique style of rowing, using one leg. Races are also held. The effigies are carried each night to a different monastery, where villagers and hill tribes gather to pay their respects.
We've been preparing since we heard the festival would go ahead. We are also doing good deeds for those people in Myanmar who are suffering as well. We are praying for them.
Eastern Shan State has been spared the worst of the violence following the military coup that has killed several thousand and seen tens of thousands arrested. Opponents of the junta urged people not to attend the festival, warning the military could use it as propaganda to claim the country is back to normal.
That's it for this edition of Access Asia. Do stay tuned for more world news here on France 24.